you have any advice, Richard?
I would say too, that's a good one. You know, having, you know, listing everything that's done on the farm, amalgamating those lists into, you know, a job category, and planning, and yeah, I mean, we've struggled with it. I mean, the people that helped us, they lived with us, and so we've struggled with that job definition. Oftentimes, the job definition was the particular person that we were working with. It was them and their personality that created the job in a lot of ways. So that's good, but then when that person goes or things change, it's hard to find somebody else. So creating a real position, so it almost creates a paradox. So how do you resolve that paradox? And, you know, that could be the job description. It could be part of both, feeling your way, growing slowly, using the resources at hand, trying to, you know, project what it is you're doing and involve other people in that. But I guess the concrete, you know, linear way of doing it would be creating that definition. You know, not unlike, you know, what some of the more successful businesses have done in terms of how they operate. And by that I mean, like, you know, you go into McDonald's for a job, and McDonald's is one of the most successful businesses in the world. They're going to tell you when to do something, how much to do, and where to do it. And if you meet those criteria and everything's flowing well, great. And so I have to acknowledge, you know, that is something that you want to strive for as a new farmer, is just creating that definition in your organization, even if it seems like an unresolvable paradox initially. You're not even sure what you're doing. You're just out there flailing away. So, you know, involving family and friends is great, but then as you go along, creating that structure and making it, flushing that out a little bit more as a real organization and a machine that can just like keep bringing people in. And maybe that's a poor analogy, but there's something about business that sort of like makes us do that in this economy, and that's one of the things that, you know, is trying to find the definition of a sustainable farm or an organic farm or sustainable future. You know, we somehow have to resolve that kind of paradox in a way, or, you know, as Thoreau said, you know, just, you know, stick with Thoreau. You know, he said, commerce curses everything it touches. And, you know, I guess you have to be a little bit cursed if you want to take something that you love and make a business out of it. But, you know, recognizing it, well, okay, there's the money, there's this thing we're trying to set up, and then, you know, trying to be at peace with it.
I have a thing I thought of that agriculture that used to be such a big part of this country is now such a small part, and it's almost, there's little pockets of it where there's successful, sustainable farming, and really we need to make that grow and not be little pockets of good farming, but really spread it out. And I think a big part of that, which you asked what we would have changed as we started, I think asking for help is a really good thing. And as Rich was saying, bringing family in, but bringing the community in, I think is essential. And bringing the community into that farming practice will also help bring the farming out into the community. And So somehow making that connection with the people all around is so important to making our farm work and making the farming sustainable in this country.
That's a really good segue, because now I want to bring the community in by letting folks in the audience, if you have questions, ask a question. And if you have a question, I'm going to repeat it, if I can hear it, so that everyone can hear it. Or maybe you could, let's see, how should we do this? Stand up and say it as loud as you can. It's being recorded. Yep. So here's a question in the front.
I have luckily a loud voice here.
Excellent.
My name is Chris, and it's nice to meet you today. Your specific remark just now, what did happen to the farmer as we used to know it? Was it money that they, a lot in our society today depends on, they don't want to stay with it because there's somewhere to profit. What happened to the farm? And why aren't more people organizing growing their own food, their own, what has happened to it? Does anybody know?
Yeah, we all know.
So I think the question is, why do we have so few farmers now?
I think one thing is it's really, really hard. And if you have the option, like nowadays, to sit in front of a radioactive electronic box and glue yourself in and plop your butt on a cushy seat for 8 hours and make a bunch of money, or work really hard and not make a lot of money, a lot of people pick that other job, which that's one of the answers. But there's a lot of answers.
Yeah, there's some.
It's a complex, yeah. I think, you know, when our food became commodified, and when it was just like a table or a chair or anything like that. Sure, right, right. And then all the economic incentives were taken out because it was all about creating cheap food at any possible way, and we're just, you know, of course, as a result, we've degraded, you know, our environment with cheap food and cheap, lifeless food. But it's a good price, you know. So that's part of the answer.
It sounds like education and more people's minds, you know, that they would settle for the commercialized and see the rewards of growing organic.
I think one thing that's really encouraging is that we have people like Annie and Paul and Richard and Jane so close to us. Are there other questions?
Can I answer a little bit, tiny one? Because the answer to that question is in the hands of everybody here. And a big part of what happened to the farmers is what is now happening is there's one person, I wouldn't even call him a farmer, that sits in a cab and runs through a field with a cab inside a big tractor. So that one person doesn't touch the soil, doesn't look at the plants, doesn't understand what's going on out there. They don't have a connection to the earth or what they're growing. So it's a mass production industry that's not connected. The spirit of the work, the plants, the beings. And so those people are able to produce food that's cheap, and that's what the power of it is in your hands. Do you want to go out and buy conventionally produced cheap food, or do you want to pay more for farmers that are working on their hands and knees and growing this local food for you? It's tricky because not everyone feels like they can, but really what's happening is in the hands a lot of the consumer, which is all.
Yeah, I think it is a cultural problem, and it's an economic problem. It's a social problem. It's all three of those. We're living in a consumer culture. Things are commodified. We're living in an industrial culture where things are specialized. Most of the farmers out there, conventional or otherwise, I don't think they're making a lot of money. I mean, they might make 1% off what their investment is, even if they are driving a big tractor or whatever. And even if they're getting government funds, who's making the money? Well, you know, ConAgra is making the money. I mean, they're doubling their money, you know, every 4 years or whatever. I mean, there was a time in the 80s when they were buying up all the grain mills out west that the farmers had set up there to collectivize their grain. So, you know, we could beat up on the big corporations here, or the mindless economy, but here we are. And, you know, what's the shift? Those systems are failing. And, you know, there's certain individuals in this society that sense that in their antennae, or whatever it is that they notice. And they're out there, you know, coming together and working together in a group, celebrating the food, celebrating the community, and, you know, putting their lives out there because, you know, well, what's the choice? I mean, in this area of Michigan, you know, we had the auto industry and that eclipsed everything and that drove the land prices high. So sure, farmers would sell their land. It didn't make sense to toil away for nothing. If you go to other states like perhaps Wisconsin, around Madison, there was a little more continuity. There was a dairy industry that was subsidized for years, and when that caved in the 90s, they had all these organic folks that went back to the land, these hippie folks around Madison. They got a very dynamic situation over there. They're, you know, 20 years ahead of us here in this area. You know, Maine is another country, another state that hasn't really lost it. I mean, if you look at different states, they're different. And, you know, we got a little more specialized and industrialized in this state, you know, because of the auto industry. It just didn't make sense economically. But where are we now? Where are we now is there is no manufacturing. We've deindustrialized. So, you know, we have like a shit mess here to clean up. And, you know, that's what our job's going to be. And if gardening in Detroit is part of it, great. If small farms are part of it, you know, terrific. You know, we have to rebuild this. And are we gonna get rich at it? No. But are we gonna clean up our mess and maybe have the chance of, you know, resolving some of these paradoxes? You know, well, why not?